So I thought they were bringing beer in. So where's the beer at? Oh, the beer is coming in the back. They actually do have beer in the back. So if you need to remember last night, there's beer in the back. Okay, so I'm going to be talking a little bit about the whole Docker experience, what's going on in the Docker space, and what Odin's doing in that space as well. So as I talk about the Docker trend, I'm also going to talk about how you as hosters and service providers can start thinking about capitalizing on some of these trends. So I'm Todd Carter. I've been with Odin for 5 years now, or just shy of 5 years in October. I'm the Senior Director of our worldwide sales engineering team. I focus primarily on the Americas, running the Americas SC team, and then I own the SC program worldwide. Been with, like I say, Odin with almost 5 years. Prior to that was Amazon Web Services, and prior to that was Symantec and Veritas. So been doing this for quite a while. And this new environment that we're seeing when it comes to the hosting space and the evolution of the hosting space, we're seeing a lot of great new technologies coming to fruition and a bit of a rebuilding in what that traditional hosting space was. So these are some of the opportunities I want to talk about and kind of walk through is, what is Docker? Why should you care? When you think about virtual machines versus containers, what's the difference? You're hearing this Docker containers. What is a Docker container versus a traditional operating system container versus a virtual machine? Where do these pieces of the puzzle fit together? When I look at our technology, Odin's Virtuoso, where does it fit into this model and how can it help you capitalize and make more money in your current infrastructures and your future advanced infrastructures you're looking to deploy? And then again, when you look at Virtuoso maybe as a solution, as a foundation for you, where does it fit and what else can come along with the Virtuoso solution sets? Then I'm going to have a little bit of a partner success story, talking about one of our partners who's been working in this space and doing some of the deployments of this technology. And then I'm going to also wrap up with a bit of a next steps. So getting right in, how many people today know what Docker is? Has you actually worked with Docker? Okay, a few. How many people from that hosting space, if you're a service provider or a hoster, are trying to think of how do you monetize this? How do you, as a hosting company or as a service provider, go after a market where you could capitalize on what Docker is bringing to the table? How you could potentially go after that DevOps community and help them bring their technologies, bring their applications to market sooner, faster, and better by utilizing you as their hosters. How many of you are working on that kind of a strategy? Okay, handful, okay, good. So let's start with the basics. What is Docker? Now, as we get into Docker, Docker is really a way for developers to package up applications, make them highly portable, do their testing, move it from a laptop into production environments, back and forth, vice versa. And the end result is the technology is going to give you a layer on top of the virtualization products that you're using today or the physical environments that you're using today. A couple of different choices there. So when you look at the Docker technology itself, it's primarily made up of what they call Docker Engine and the Docker Hub. Those two pieces of technology working together are what a developer or a DevOps team could then utilize in order to implement their technologies, make their testing dev cycles quicker, faster. But that technology also sits on top of an overall infrastructure. So when I get into what is Docker, I go back to this statement here. When you think about how hot the Docker technology is, the trends, you can go out and look at YouTube videos, you can go out and do any kind of search, and you're seeing a lot of companies jumping in with different derivatives of how you could either launch or offer a Dockerized type of a solution. But part of the challenge is the word container. Where is a application container fit compared to a traditional container technology at an operating system level? So that's part of the challenge you run into. So as I get into my demos and my testing here, we're going to spend about 2 hours going through the command line on Docker so you guys really understand exactly how you build a Docker solution. Seeing who's listening, because it's really fun. Command line, love it. Virtual machines versus containers, what's the difference? This is always a bit of confusion going on in the market today. So first off, when you look at a virtual machine is made up of, as you know, a lot of different components, but primarily it's a hardware, you drop an operating system or a virtualization stack on it, and then from there you're going to spin up these different virtual machines. Each virtual machine is going to have its own operating system, its own way of taking the physical resources and bringing them into an environment that you're able to control at that virtualized environment. That's the traditional way of doing virtual machines. It's very resource intensive, requires an operating system inside of each virtual machine. Licensing can become more of a cumbersome, things like that. Compared to what's known as an operating system container. This is something that we've been doing for close to 15 years now. When you look at an operating system container, it's a much lighter environment where you take the same hardware, but when you install the actual technology, you're installing a host kernel with virtualization layer embedded into it. And then on that environment, you then spin up each of your different containers with whatever applications you're going to run into it. There is no need to install an extra operating system into each one because you're actually pulling from that core virtualization stack, or what we call virtuoso. So when you look at those two different comparisons, you're going to have a lower cost, higher elasticity with more revenue opportunity per physical node. So when you go out and look at your capital expenses, if I'm going to buy a physical server, would I prefer to do the physical server based on what is on your left or what was on your right? If I can have more virtual environments spun up per physical node, and therefore you can charge for each of those virtual environments, obviously the math makes sense. You want to go with something that's going to be more lightweight and allow you to have more virtual environments per physical node. Now, when you hear about Docker, everything's about Docker containers. And so, yes, Docker does require container technology, but traditionally the way that it's been built out is you would take your container, the Docker container, the application container, and you would run it primarily on something like an LXC or a libcontainer stack. The challenge with LXC and libcontainer is that it lacks management. They're fairly new standards, only a couple years old. There's a lot of security issues around them. They're not fully baked yet, so there's a lot of concerns with security when you're actually using a Docker container running inside of that, quote, LXC or lib container. And there's some stability issues that you just got to be aware of, that as you move into production environments and you're starting to put a lot of workload onto those environments, that you just make sure that you have a very robust and sound solution that you've built out. So those are some of the key concerns when you're looking at an operating system container running inside of another container technology compared to maybe another option. So when you look at that open source environment, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to stack this whole thing together: hardware, operating system, hypervisor, virtual hardware, the guest OS, and then you drop this Docker container, this Docker application container on top of that. So the end result is you still have this virtual machine, and you got a lot of extra layers and overhead. Therefore, you're pushing that big rock up a hill when it comes to how do I spend less money, where in this environment you're going to spend more money. So this is one of the challenges that we see in that virtual machine environment compared to when you're looking at it from a container technology at an operating system level. Now, this dollar sign doesn't represent just licensing costs, because you would have the same problem whether it was KVM, Zen, things like that. You still have this extra layers of overhead from a resource consumption perspective. So you're still going to use up more resources in that physical node because of these extra layers of overhead that you're going to have to deal with. Compared to, when you look at what we're doing, we're saying, hey, look, if you don't need a VM, you can do all of the same kinds of capacity and controls, but you can do it with Virtuoso, eliminating a lot of those different steps. Now, let's dig into that for a second. So when you look at how Virtuoso and Docker can work together, you take the best of both worlds. Docker's going to give you that open platform, application packaging tools, application sharing hub. It's going to give those DevOps people that you're going to go after and say, hey, if you come and build your solutions, maybe build on your laptop and then push it to me, I'll be your hoster for that. Once you've got that kind of a relationship, you can start seeing things like linking apps with data, managing that application lifestyle. These are the different tools that you could embed into your overall offering to help that DevOps community. And you can help them remove that friction between environments by having this Docker solution running on top of your platform. It's going to give that DevOps community that quick cloud app development capability, application portability. There's workflow automation that you can embed into the solution. So these are the things that Docker can help you take to your end customers market if you're going after that DevOps community. Now, you add that with what we're doing in our virtualization stack. We can now take that same Docker application, but put it inside of a Virtuoso OS container, operating system container, and the Virtuoso operating system can take care of all of that security. We already have a lot of that security functionality built into our products. Some additional things you can take the benefit of is we also have what we call cloud storage, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Where does cloud storage help you as a hoster, as that service provider, building out an infrastructure for your end customers? We've got built-in resource management capabilities, and a lot of this is actually running in our demo booth, so please feel free to come by our demo booth. We've got this whole thing up and running over there, and our sales engineering teams are more than welcome, are more than happy to help show you some of these capabilities. Now, when it comes to the storage, we also have a non-disruptive storage replication, which gives you that high availability. Now, somebody who's built up that Docker stack on top of your platform, if you did have a physical node failure, there's ways that that storage can actually replicate across the environment and protect that overall experience with some automated load balancing across it as well. And the end result is it's going to give you more revenue per physical server. It gives you the ability to offer a more secure, elastic, and scalable solution, and it gives you that high availability. These are the things that you are now able to put out there as that advanced VPS hosting or that advanced virtual infrastructure hosting options. And that becomes that new foundation, that new advancement that you can then utilize to support your Docker community, your Docker DevOps communities. So what does it all mean? Docker plus Virtuoso, it gives you the key check marks that your customers are looking for today. Now there's lots of ways to build these things, but when you're looking at it from a hosting perspective and you're charging people and you want to put SLAs out there and you want to be able to offer that type of solution, you really want to think through security and scalability, how you can make sure you got a fast cloud deployment, modern infrastructure. This is going to allow you to go after and attack this new audience and find new revenue streams for your company for you to grow with. So these are things that we're hearing from our customer base that they're excited about. Again, it's still new technology, but it's out there and it's built on some very foundational technologies if you want to deploy these and implement these. So this is where we basically can start talking about, where does the service provider using Virtuoso fit in? So again, no VMs are needed within Virtuoso. Security is solved directly with the operating system containers, which is encapsulating the overall Docker application container that you've packaged up. So a DevOps person comes, takes his packaged application, he pushes it into a Virtuoso container, and you already have that security. So now he feels more comfortable pushing that application into production, knowing that you as his hoster are offering him higher levels of security. You can have multiple Docker instances per physical server. Elasticity, scalability of the container technology. Again, these are the things that help you grow your environment, make more money by having the right hosting platforms to support these types of technologies. One other key thing I'll talk a little bit more about is utilizing existing unused storage. We've done a lot of studies with a lot of our larger hosters, and there's 40-50% of the storage sitting in your physical nodes going unused. Why not capture that storage, turn it into a pooled resource that you can make money off of? The end result is you can make more revenues per physical server using this type of a technology than you could using a traditional virtual machine. And most of the hosters out here, you already know that. How many of you are currently using Virtuoso today? So probably about a third of you at least. So we've been doing this for a long time, and it's been kind of one of our claims to fame when it gets into that hosting space is you really want to optimize how much revenue you can get per physical node, and this is one of the ways to do that. Now, there's more to Virtuoso today than just containers, and I wanted to point that out just for a second. So we have our container technology. We've had that for many years. A couple years ago, we launched a new feature within our Virtuoso solution called Virtuoso Storage. But you also have the traditional virtual machine. So if you do have an environment that requires a workload that needs to run on a virtual machine, you can now take one product with these different features and determine which features you want to turn on, which you want to turn off, what kind of a cluster, what kind of a pooled resource. You can now architect a solution that can take all of the solutions, all these features, or a combination of a subset, depending on how you want to go to market. But one product, one support call can now take care of supporting all of your virtual infrastructure, whether it's container technology, whether it's virtual machine technology, and or storage technology. Now, digging into the storage just a little bit. Traditionally, you have your direct attached storage. You've got your traditional storage area networks. Again, came from a Veritas background, so I spent a lot of years doing high availability and storage. And this is really what we're starting to see more and more is that storage is not as complex as it used to be. You can now operationalize and use software to build out a lot of what you get in a traditional storage area network. So if I can go back to that physical node where I'm only using 40 or 50% of my storage, and I can capture that storage into a resource that gives me all the functionality of what a traditional SAN and or the direct attached storage can give me from a performance perspective compared to the overall higher availability of a SAN, does that make sense? Most people we've been working with say, yes, that does make sense, let's move forward. How does it work? The Virtuoso storage gives you the benefits of a storage area network without the extra cost and overhead, because what we do is we basically take all of the hard drives, we look at each one of those machines, and we decide on which machines have the extra storage that you can then pool that into one replicatable environment. So all those hard drives connected into a storage cluster. The service provider can now take those machines, all that extra storage, and it basically creates a pooled resource. This is my demo part. Let's make sure it doesn't break. And Virtuoso turns all that unused disk into a single cluster. And it's very scalable. You can just simply add more nodes to this environment. And in fact, the more nodes you add to the environment, the faster it gets, because you're actually spreading that workload out across more spindles. So once you have the overall configuration up and running, we've had teams that have actually put these things together, a 5-node cluster in 3 to 4 hours. And again, this is technology we'd love to get into your hands, so come talk to us. I'd love to get a lab going with you. Make sure you can have your hands on, get some experience with this technology. But once you have that pool up and running, now as you build virtual machines, those virtual machines and or those containers that you're bringing online, they're actually taking their content, their data, and they're putting that into that storage pool. So now all of the blocks that would be associated with those virtual machines are now being stored in a replicated fashion. Now, once you have that configuration up and running, as you bring on new virtual machines, as you bring on new containers, it's going to automatically distribute that workload across your clustered environment. Now, in the event you did lose a physical server, which is a known fact, you are going to lose hard drives, you are going to lose servers in your environment, but the system now will automatically replicate the failed server's content across that clustered environment and reallocate it into other virtual nodes within that cluster. And it does it automatically. There's ways for you to then go in and check your alerts, repair that hardware, and then decide do you want to leave these failed virtual machines and these containers that have been moved over to these other environments, either leave them where they are, or go ahead and just tag them and move them back to this new physical node. So there's lots of ways you can manage the technology all built in. And again, we've got this running in our demo booth over here. Be happy to show you more details about how it works. So that's basically the technology, and I'm going to give you a quick story about a partner of ours down in Australia. And Kinetics has been working in this industry for about 10 years, helping their hosters, their customers, host solutions through them. They really focus on that kind of superior hardware. They're really into more advanced virtual private servers. They're using new solid-state drives. They're doing a lot of new fabric technologies. So they're really wanting to be able to bring a high-performance solution to market. But they also looked at the cost of SANs, and they're like, boy, that's going to cost us a lot of money to get into that. So what could I do to give me that enterprise-grade solution, provide me these applications to my customers, and then move into that option of where they could scale out, going back to 2013 when they started planning this. And the end results is they said, well, if we could come up with a way that we could get the scalability of a SAN-like performance and reduce that hardware cost and footprint, give us the cost efficiency, higher infrastructure, and the key one is also, where can I look at new growth opportunities? So with our Virtuoso, they've now launched these new platforms, they have them in market, and this is the end results of where they're growing their company. They were able to go to one partner, one support environment, and a team was able to help them put these things together in a very quick fashion. And going back to the new growth opportunities, they are currently evaluating, where do we go with this whole Docker container thing? Going back to the whole concept, right? So they're trying to figure out the same thing. What can we do with Docker container technology, which is now actually natively embedded in our Virtuoso? So when you go out and download Virtuoso as of update 9, we've actually embedded the Docker functionality into the Virtuoso. So you can actually run your Docker commands, spin up your Dockerized containers, things like that, all within that same command line, within that same exact product. The other things that they were looking at is, when they, that didn't come out very well. So basically, this was a quote from Jamin, which basically was, I'll read it for you. Actually, it doesn't show up any better on my screen up here either. But basically, he was looking at, someday providing Docker applications, looking at the managed services. That's really where he feels that they can offer more value, is using this technology, taking a Docker option to their market, but then also offering managed services around that infrastructure. So as an engineer or as a DevOps person, they don't have to worry about building the infrastructure, managing storage, things like that. They just come to their hoster, and that hoster takes care of all that for them. And they're going to have a managed service offering that wraps it to make sure that that's a very highly available environment as well, and then extra professional services on top of that. So with that, this is kind of my call to action, is that we're offering some free storage. Get a hold of us. There's a nice little video that talks a bit more specifically around what Virtuoso does in this market. Again, we've got our account teams and our sales engineers in our booth. Please stop by. We can get you more information about how you can test drive the product, get it into your production environments, get a free terabyte of storage to go along with it. And we look forward to working with you and getting some labs in your environments and getting your hands on this technology as well. With that, I thank you very much for your time. Beer's in the back. And let me know if there's anything else I can answer, any questions I can answer for you.
I do have one question.
Yes.
Just watching your presentation, one of the things I noted is sometimes if you're doing spindle drives, and you can accomplish large storage arrays in that fashion. One of the things that we ran into, though, is it was cheaper to buy server blades that only had 2 physical drives in them, and of course we wanted to do SSD. So the cost of SSD is still quite high. Yep. So, I mean, I understand the idea of using that as a SAN, but is that always the most effective way to use those resources?
It always depends on the environment. It depends on the customer base you're going after, the workload you're wanting to be able to operationalize. So it's always that trade-off. You really need to look at what that workload is, what that customer base is going to look like, and then go from there. I mean, it definitely does depend.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, I mean, we considered that as one of our storage models, and what we ended up doing is going with a cloud cluster, 24 blades that had a built-in SAN, and we utilized both, both the SSD storage and then selling SAN at a reduced cost to our customers for larger amounts of storage.
Yep. That's another great use case. Yep.
Thanks.
Another question in the back?
More questions?
No? Oh, he was just hoisting his beer.
Sure, I'm coming over.
Do you manage the Virtuoso containers and VMs from the same control panel?
Say that again?
Would you manage the containers and the VMs from the same control panel?
Yes, yeah, in fact, basically we have a technology, it's called our virtual automation. It's basically the tool set that manages it. And basically, we've got it in our demo booth over here, but basically I can look at my physical node, and then that physical node I can spin up virtual machines, containers simultaneously on the same machines.
It's a separate product to POA, is it?
Yeah, this is our virtualization stack. So the other product you're mentioning there, POA, is something that's more of an orchestration engine that sits on top of it that you'd be able to utilize for monetizing the environment, billing for it. So you can take this stack here, put that underneath what we call our cloud infrastructure module or the new advanced VPS module. So those two pieces of technology then sit on top of Virtuoso to utilize the actual virtualization and storage functionality.
Okay, thanks.
You bet.
I'm coming. Super fast.
If somebody is thinking of benefits of using Virtuoso containers, what is of greater benefit to DevOps? Is it saving on cost from this solution, or is it agility of automating and spinning and sharing applications and convenience of the development process and testing how the application would work?
So great question. If you separate the question into two different realms, if you will, the question is more about the DevOps person, right? So the DevOps person who's building an application, the question then becomes, can that DevOps person get a greater benefit by going to a hoster that's using these technologies as a way of helping him build his applications? So if they're doing it internally and they're going to go out to their IT guys and say, hey, IT, build this out for me, more than likely it's going to be a VMware-based type of a solution set. But from that DevOps perspective, he doesn't really see any difference. So it really turns into more of the question of, as the hoster or as the individual who's operationalizing this infrastructure, how do you get the best bang for your buck? How do you get the most optimized infrastructure to support that DevOps community?
But aren't there some DevOps inside enterprise?
There are. We personally don't go after the enterprise space. We're here to help our hosters go after that workload, go after that customer. So that's really the difference. Okay, thanks.
Okay, I saw one more hand. I think maybe we'll call this the last question because pretty close to time, but
Real quick question. When you talked about the Virtuoso storage, how does that compare to what you would call object-based storage?
Great question. So you always want to think of storage as your foundation, right? Storage is going to be a block storage type of an architecture. And then you can take that block storage and turn it into other things, one of being an object storage. So there's one of our partners here, Rush Files. So Rush Files basically has a software application that runs on top of that physical compute and networking and storage pieces to then take that infrastructure and turn it into object storage that can then be consumed as kind of that file sync and share or those types of applications that are more of an object storage based solution set. So this is really kind of an underpinning, the technology that sits underneath it, but you'd still need that software piece on top of it that would turn this storage array into an object storage array.
all right, let's.
All right, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.